Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be wrapping up the second half of November and December. During this I read 16 books between the 1.5 months. So I guess with that said, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to start is that I read 3 more stories from Emma James' collected ghost stories. I read Casting the Runes, I read A Warning to the Curious, and I read The Wailing Well. They're fine. I don't quite, this was from my supernatural fiction class, and I have to say, a lot of the works that we studied in this class I didn't understand, so there's that. I guess it's not a book that I like. It's not something that I'll just go out of my way, I think, to read from again, but what can you do? The next book I read was for a different class. It was for my Canadian prose class, and that was Course of Mushrooms by Harumi Goto. And this book was so good. It's one that I would recommend for anyone to read. It follows this grandmother and her granddaughter. It goes through both of their point of views, and it talks about their culture to their Japanese roots. And the grandmother is Japanese and immigrated to Canada, so her granddaughter is second generation Canadian. And I found that this book was so good, and I really enjoyed how their storytelling was such a huge element, and food was a huge element, and it was all connected with like family, and I just really enjoyed this book, and I recommend this book to anyone. And I just love it so much, and I really am happy that this was on the book list for that class. The next book I read during this time was The Last of the Wine by Mary Renaud. This was for my classics class, and this is a work that takes place during ancient Greece during the Peloponnesian Wars, and it follows our main character Alexis, and it goes through his life throughout ancient Greece throughout this war. And while this was not written at this time, it was very well researched, and it kind of allows readers to kind of get a glimpse of what happened during this time and some of the things that you might find. So if you have an interest for ancient Greece, this would definitely be something I would recommend for readers. I'm going to skip over a few things, so we're going slightly out of order here, but it's going to be for the benefit of the crossover of the months. The last full book that I read during the month of November was My Year Meets by Ruth Uzaki. This was, again, for my Canadian prose class. This follows our main character Jane, who's a documentarian, and we follow her learning the process of the meat industry as well as the culture influence. Since this is a series that she's working on, is directed towards Japanese women, so you kind of see the differences in cultures and stuff like that. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. I see the points of it, but you can tell that there's so much more there wasn't that much that I caught interest in while reading this one, especially compared to Course of Mushrooms. But still, it was an interesting read. And if you are someone who has an interest in the meat industry and wants to learn more, this is an option. Okay, for the crossovers of the 2 months, we have Ancient Sorcery and Other Weird Stories by Algernon Blackwood. This was the last thing for my children, my Canadian this was the last thing to read for my supernatural fiction, and we read several stories from this. In November, I read The Willows and The Wendigo. I really enjoyed The Willows. The Willows was a really interesting one. But in December, we read Ancient Sorceries, we read The Glamour of the Snow, and we read The Man Whom the Trees Loved. I liked The Man Whom the Trees Loved, I think, the most. It was very creepy, and a lot of Blackwood's stories have to deal with nature as the primal focus in his horror type books. So if you're interested in that, he would be he takes nature and puts like this mysterious action towards it, and I think that it's a very interesting read if you're into that kind of stuff. Continuing on with December, I read There'll Be Peace When You Are Done, and this is edited by Lynn S. Samburnis. This is a collection of essays from fans and actors of the show Supernatural. I read this after the my original plan was to read this after the show ended. I couldn't. I was still very, very emotional, and thinking about the show ending made me cry a lot. So I kind of took like a little bit longer to get to it. But once I started crying at the thought of the show ending, I read this book, and it was very nice to read, especially since some of the actors in it were only in it for like an episode. And it was so nice to see how the show impacted even people who who just had like a small dip into it and left. And as well as Jared and Jensen, who were the main two characters, and how that really changed their lives, and the fans that it really changed their lives. It really makes you feel that like even though the show helped you through some shitty ass situations, you were not the only one who the show helped. And it's something that I really appreciated about this book. And I recommend this one as well as Family Don't End With Blood for Supernatural fans. It's really, really nice. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so next 3 books I'm going to talk about are from the library because I finally got to them. I'll have to return them now soon. But first one is Ironheart, Riri Williams. This is a comic about Riri Williams, who ends up taking over the mantle of Iron Man after the, I think, death of Iron Man. It was fun. She's a genius. It was enjoyable. I found that some of the plot lines throughout the issues kind of got lost on me though, so that brought down the rating. But overall, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And I really enjoyed it. It was interesting. Especially, I think this would be very interesting for the MCU to bring her into the movies and stuff. But yeah, that was fun. The next I read was Under the Moon by Lauren Miracle. This is a Catwoman story. It's I don't know. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the Bruce and Selena interactions. Those were fun. But I also didn't enjoy the Selena story. Like, some of the things that Selena did not line up with how Selena is to me because of the comics. And I don't know how I feel about it. Don't know. I don't know. The next book I read was Unbroken, 13 Stories Starring Disabled Teens, which was edited by Meraki Mijamki, I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a collection of, this is an anthology that talks about follows disabled teens from different levels of disability, and it's just, it was very, I really enjoyed some of the stories. Shit, I wish I could remember which ones I really love, but that's written down Goodreads and I'm on my phone right now, so I think I'll pop on screen my favorite story now, and so then like you got an idea of what my favorite stories are. I found that it was interesting. Some of the stories I didn't care for, some I do, which is why I got 3 out of 5 stars. Short story collections are very hard to get high or low because some stories you care for, some you don't. But overall, it was a fun time. Finally, the last book that I read during 2020 was These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This takes place in 1920s Shanghai, and it's a Romeo and Juliet story. It follows Juliet and Roma, who is our main characters. They're in 2 opposite gangs, and a monster's on the loose, and they gotta find out what the monster is and put an end to it. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the story. Some of it was a little but I'm very interested to see where this story goes in the future, and I'm looking forward to continuing with this series. So that's it. Those are the books I read in the last month and a half of 2020. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.